Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Think Business Live. Excited to have the head of hotels and hospitality, Senior Managing Director Andy Coleman, and Senior Director of Investment Sales of Hotels and Hospitality, Dan Hawkins. Fellas, I've been looking forward to connecting with you because in your space of hotels and hospitality, we've all kind of been seeing what's been happening. And as a business person, where I think one of the most important things that we can always do is help our clients navigate what's through any issue, right? The good times, the bad times. Help them dissect and understand information, and help them make decisions, right? What's that next step decision? And so so I wanted to really open up our conversation there. How are you helping your clients in real time, walk through making a decision today?
So John, it's a really good question. And I'll tell you kind of as the premise or the foundation before we get into that too much is I think we've spent a really good time changing what was our mindset or our focus coming into this. So Dan and I are in the business of being real middlemen. We'll have a buyer and a seller, or a lender and a borrower. And there are plenty of times, most of the time, we're trying to play two different sides. This has been a really interesting dynamic in the hospitality space. And we've had to consciously really work to change our mindset, which is the only way for the hotel industry to get through this is if everybody's rowing in the same direction. Yeah. So we're really, really focused on that. And one of the tools we've been using is really putting ourselves in the other person's shoe, or chair, and trying to figure out how they're looking or viewing on the market that we're in. Because being in their mindset is the only way that we can get a true understanding of how we can help them. Yeah. We may have an understanding of how we think we can help them, but until we're really thinking as a owner, or as a lender, or as a seller, or as a buyer, it's the only real way for us to do that. So I think that was the first step that we've taken. And what's been really interesting, and I'm really proud of the hotel space, and Dan, I think you would say the same thing, is I think this is the most cohesion and kind of collective goodwill I've seen in our industry in quite some time. That doesn't mean that it was rough or bad beforehand, but in this specific incident surrounding COVID-19, everybody is kind of looking out for the industry as a whole. And I think that that's been really, really helpful. I think that, like many folks, the initial shock of this, John, had all of us just taking a step back and trying to take a deep breath and figure out which way was up. That probably took the first, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of this. And then we decided, hey, look, if our clients, be it lenders, borrowers, buyers, seller, they can't be on the defensive because this thing is here, right? And we've got to help solve for X now. So how can we do that? And the number one tool I think I've used and our team has used, I know I'm incredibly proud of Dan and the thoughtfulness he's put out there, is trying to be better communicators with everybody to figure out what solutions are viable, what solutions are actually helpful, and what solutions will do, in fact, provide a solution, as opposed to, living in the world of fairy dust. And so we've had some great communications with all of our respective clients, be it on all sides of the table, if you will. And we've really focused on that. So getting a better understanding of how is Wells Fargo viewing their position in this deal? How is borrower A viewing their position in this deal? How is, this franchisor viewing their position in this deal? How is this franchisee viewing their position in this deal? I think that collectively, as we've worked through a lot of that together, we've all learned an awful lot about the other parties. And I think that that's helping us now as we work through this. So it's going to be an interesting time in that there are a lot of markets that are bouncing back sooner than others. There are a lot of markets that are still stuck in what feels like the 1200s, if you will. And so we've got to really bifurcate the haves and the have-nots and focus on the people that need help more quickly, who have pressing needs, who have forbearance coming to an expiration, who are having difficulties with their lenders, and putting on our collective hats to see how we can help. I'm incredibly proud, I must say, to be able to work with folks like Dan who share that same mindset. And I think that that's resonating in the marketplace. And Dan, I'd love to open back up to you to see kind of what you're hearing and seeing and how you've been attacking this a little bit differently than you may have 6 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Andy. As usual, I think the biggest pivot for me was going from, a sales advisor, going out and hustling and trying to get listings and getting out to market and trying to create a market for an asset and for a property and for a client, and really pivoting, especially the first couple of weeks, which were very difficult, to more of a business advisor as opposed to just a sales advisor. And now that people have gotten their, they were lucky enough to get their PPP, and now, as you said, forbearance is coming to the end in some cases. Do I sell if I need to create liquidity? Do I hold? What does each scenario look like? Do I bring in some sliver equity, some preferred, some mezz to kind of create some liquidity to kind of hold me over? And I'm finding that a lot of my conversations are more in that advisory capacity as opposed to the sales capacity.
Yeah, and Dan, with that, right? And John, this is not a marriage counseling session, but I will use an example that I have with my wife, which is when my wife and I are trying to solve something. I found for Ann and I, the best way for us to get through it is if we let our guard down and we're just honest with each other. Yeah. Dan and I, at the end of the day, as much as we like to call ourselves real estate advisors and intermediaries and all this fancy stuff, the world very often just thinks of us as brokers. We are not just brokers by any stretch of the imagination. And by allowing ourselves to let our guard down and for our clients to feel that they know, and I fundamentally believe that they all believe this at their core, we have their best interests at heart, that we found that they're being much more open with us with what they really need. And that what that does is it allows Dan and I and all of our teammates to solve problems that we otherwise just would have had too many roadblocks in front of us to solve. I think it's actually helped too, where our clients who we're negotiating with on the other side of the table are now saying, wow, I didn't really think that way. I hadn't thought about it that way before. Right. Maybe I should change the construct in my negotiation tactic here because that's going to be better for all of us. And that change of mindset has just been really, really helpful for us. And I'm proud that our team, Dan specifically, and others have been leading the charge and kind of flipping that script as to how we're viewed in this process.
Yeah. Dan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Andy and I are in unique positions. Andy grew up, his dad owns a hotel, owns a bar in the hotel and everything. So Andy grew up in the business. I worked on the principal side, and actually as part of my training on the principal side, I actually worked in a hotel. So I think we are in unique positions to actually really put ourselves in the chair, the shoes, whatever the metaphor is, of some of our clients, and really feel and understand because we've both been there in some capacity before.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful, Dan, to note. And then we have some clients, right? I mean, I remember back, I still have flashbacks. And if I start twinging, it's because I remember these days. In 1981, when my dad's interest rate on the Phoenix Park Hotel in Washington was like 21.5%, right? And if a water pipe burst in the middle of the night, my dad was leaving his 6 kids at home, and he's not a plumber, just for the record. And he was down trying to fix a water problem. And I was cleaning air conditioners, hotels, when I was growing up as a summer job. And I think that does, Dan, to your point, put us in a unique perspective, certainly for our owners who own 2, 5, 10 assets, 15 assets. For our larger fund clients, I think that's really, really important, and our REIT clients and others, because we can then give them a perspective that they have no view on, right? We can tell them what it's like on the ground level. So we can connect with our smaller owners, because they understand that we can relate to what their day-to-day, minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour pressures are. And for our big fund and, larger public company owners, if you will, we can give them a viewpoint of what it's like to feel like you're on boots on the ground.
Yeah, I love it. I just want to welcome Matt Raptosh, who's Director of Mortgage Banking at Berkadia.
Hi, everyone.
with the team. How you doing, man?
Doing well, thank you, John.
Good to
Hi,
see
Matt.
you.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Andy. How are you? Hi, Dan.
So fellas, let's dive in deeper to the mindset, because you both have touched on the mindset, and I think one of the mindset and leadership for a second, because it's times like this during a crisis where leaders really step up, advisors really step up. You have to know your business. You have to know how to advise, where to gather information, how to get it, and then how to articulate it to a client and what it means to them, so they can understand it not only in real time, but how they can make decisions when the data there's no past data, it's just today's data, and making forecasts based on I would say today or the next few weeks, maybe a few months. And I think one of the things, just as you were saying, Andy, earlier, companies realizing they're behind the times. How do you combine mindset, leadership, and technology to service the client so they can, really make good decisions and figure things out?
It's a really good question, John. I think there's a lot of layers to that question. I think the first quick answer is that bullshit doesn't do anybody good in markets like this. We have to be the experts. We can't say we're the experts. We have to act and prove to our clients that we know what we're doing. Now, thankfully, we have an incredible track record of knowledge and working through deals where we can prove that to them. But fluff only gets you so far. And it's markets like this where the cream really does rise to the top. We're really, really lucky in that not only do we have the best producers in the country, and I'll stand by that statement as long as I'm walking on this earth. We also have two of the best parent companies in Jefferies and Berkshire Hathaway that give us incredible resources that others don't have, as well as incredible leadership at our corporate level. So Justin Wheeler and Ernie Kate and Hillary Province and others have put in place some big data initiatives going back a few years, where I would say that we are well out ahead of the marketplace in what is our connection with data. Data is the key to the future. I mean, it's everything. And the numbers don't lie. And where we find it's really beneficial to us is when we're negotiating with two parties, numbers are impartial. So if I'm going back to a lender and they say, well, this is what I think, and I'm like, well, no, actually the data shows that allows us to take that fluff out of the conversation so we can focus right in on what the issue is and solve for it. And as long as we have the data to give us the tools to solve for something, we can solve for anything. We've all been through interesting markets, down markets, certainly nothing like what we're going through now. But you have to have that data. You have to have the knowledge base behind you. That gets you 98% of the way there, though, John. That doesn't get you all the way there. You also have to have the relationships and the trust of the parties that you're dealing with to get you over that final hump. And I think we spent a lot of time at Berkadia building each of those pieces. But Matt, I know you haven't had a chance to chime in yet. What are some of the data tools you've been using, be it in hotels or any of the other sectors that we've in, that you think are a real differentiator to help folks?
Berkadia, we have access with our partners as well, as you've mentioned, Andy, with Jefferies and Berkshire overall. They provide us with a tremendous amount of information, as well as our senior management team and some of our peer-to-peer information that we share internally on our weekly calls. That information has been key to getting out in front of many of our clients ahead of time, both through the PPP programs, as the market has changed and turned. And it continues to. We continue to send that information out. We share it amongst each other. I share that with my clients. It opens up conversations and creates an opportunity for us to identify the pains they're going through today, as well as the pains that they're looking at tomorrow, and find ways to work together to help solve that.
Yeah, so Matt, I think you bring up a really interesting bifurcation there that I hadn't thought about, John, and I think it's really important. When we talk about data, people want to talk about employment rates or, what are the demographics in this place? What's the business travel here? That's one component of it. You also have to have the data as to where the market is at that stage in time. And that's where that peer-to-peer conversations that Mr. Raptosh talked about are so helpful. It's great if you know what's going on with occupancy in a market. But if you don't know how the lenders are viewing the capital market space at that moment in time, that data doesn't do you any good. So the ability to connect all of those pieces, both through the strength of the company, the strength of the platform, the strength of the teammates, as well as the numerical data behind it, that's the only way to solve for this, I think. Dan, you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The peer-to-peer stuff and the herd on the street stuff right now is the most important thing in our industry because hotels are so unique. And then going more broadly, I would say that, Berkadia has a tool called market resiliency. And it shows how a market, a micro or macro market has historically survived through different downturns and the industry clusters they have and how they're prepared to perform in the near term. And that's been a useful tool for some of our clients as well.
Yeah. Fellas, let's talk about that's amazing stuff. And, it's so important in today's market. And so just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that, to me, in this market, you need a lot of things. But if you look at four things, we all need to be really effective communicators. We all need to have empathy of what's going on in everybody's world. We got to be grateful that we actually, are playing the game and talking to people. And then we have to hold ourselves accountable to really the follow-up and the standards of what we do. As a business person, as a salesperson, I've always thought it's nobody's responsibility to ever call me back. I'll just keep on calling them, right? Yeah. Until they tell me not to. And so I'm 48. I think I've had one person tell me absolutely just stop calling me. But most people really appreciate it. And the reason I bring it up is because I think people are so busy with not only work right now and their families while people are home and homeschooling, even though that's finishing up, but they're busy with their mind, with just their mind. It's moving in 1,000 different directions. And it's summertime, so people are wanting to unplug, but they're trying to course correct for the last couple months, and they're in the game, and you can't get out of the game right now. And so when it comes to holding yourselves accountable, right, just as business people in today's market, post the last 3 months, which has felt for many like 3 years, how do you hold yourselves accountable to wake up and just have a really productive day every day?
Dan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it's the two prongs that come to mind is one, having a plan. What am I doing today? Who am I calling? Why am I calling them? Is it just checking in, or do I have something to tell them? Is it market intel? Is it something I heard? Are they a buyer? Do I have something that maybe works for where they want to place money? And then I would say the bigger thing and the great thing I love about Berkadia, as opposed to other platforms I've worked on or worked at, is my peers and my colleagues. I talk to Matt Raptosh sometimes more than I want to, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. I talk to Andy all the time, and then we talk as a group, obviously, a couple of times a week as well. And I think using each other as emotional support, because for lack of a better term, we've really become therapists and advisors for our clients over the last couple of weeks or months, and it's been taxing at times. So I think the ability to be able to have each other really lean on each other has been very important for me to kind of survive through this cycle.
Yeah, I think what's been helpful too, right, is that I don't like eating asparagus at night. Sometimes I force myself to do it because it's healthy. The difference in our job is I love what I do, and I love helping people. That's all the motivation that I need. I wake up every morning and I'm charged. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go help somebody today. And it may be, let's keep in mind, full disclosure, we're commission-based employees, right? So it does help us at the same time. But we really, really like what we're doing. And John, you talk about calls and holding ourselves accountable for checking in and making sure we're doing what we're doing. I actually have a pre-sort to that, which is if you're calling 1,000 times a day, or I'm calling 1,000 times a day, or anybody else is, I want folks on the other end of the line to really feel like Andy's calling me for me. Andy's not calling me for Andy. Yeah. And that is one of the main motivators that I have personally and our team has, and I'll speak for everybody, and that's what's the differentiator for us. We had a really great conversation a few weeks back that you may have witnessed, John, our webinar we had with folks from Hilton and Marriott and one of the largest franchisees. And one of the topics that came out of that was everybody just caring about each other and what their best interests were. That's what motivates me to get out of bed. I want to get out of bed in the morning so I can be a great dad, so I can be a great husband. But I also want Steve Fairbanks at Pinnacle to get off a call with me and say, you know what? Andy cares more than other people, because that's a differentiator. And that's where, if I'm holding myself accountable to that first, the number of calls that I make, that comes easy. I find myself wanting to call people. Hey, I only made 50 calls today. Let's make another 50 because they're really enjoyable calls with folks on the other line.
Yeah, I love that. Matt, how about you?
The waking up in that day-to-day part, it's always been a part of my day. I work out of my house. I've worked out of my home for about 12 years now. And so it's always been, so I have not had the big disruption that everybody else has experienced. I am very used, you probably see me look around, I'm very used to having children moving all around and those distractions that people are probably now getting used to now. But that type of self-motivation I've had to learn and put in place. So for me, that I have not felt that disruption. But on the other hand, I've always believed in a written pipeline, which I've shared with you, John, and that written pipeline now, and working with your coach and John and our team here at Berkadia, that day-to-day now includes more now today than ever in my past partnerships on internally within Berkadia. And so I can't think, I've got a very robust pipeline. We're actually in the process of closing one deal and hopefully getting a term sheet right now on another. And in that process, though, I'm not alone. And as Dan mentioned, I'm working on 2 transactions with him. I believe every deal except for maybe one in my pipeline right now, I have at least 2, maybe 5 or 6 other Berkadians as partners. Yeah. And that's that through this COVID is probably going to be the biggest change in the way I move forward, is leveraging the power of the platform and the team. Because most importantly, I'm having more fun, and I'm having more fun because I'm having more success, and my clients are happier because they're getting access to, many hands make for light work. And I'm finding that multiplying factor is conveying on to the clients and their success, and they're fine, and every one of the team's eating, it's making me my day easier. It's also someone I can talk to on a day and share in these difficult and different times to share the load with. And so that's that one team, one goal here at Berkadia. We do live it pretty well.
And Matt, I think you're giving some credit to the benefit you have of the team, and you're selling yourself short. There's great benefits to the rest of the team in working with you as well, because you're just a great guy. And you had a great resource to it. I mean, the one thing I will say, I'll correct on John. He said, "What do you guys do when you wake up in the morning?" I can speak for Dan and Matt. I don't think they sleep. I have to sleep because I got so many young kids, but I'm not sure you ever have to wake up. It seems like you're working all the
time. Well, I love all the love that you guys are sharing. It's great, and it starts at the core, and then that's ultimately what clients feel. I want to talk a little bit about just. Not necessarily only the clients that you're talking to, but just companies, just in general. I think right now, as we're walking through COVID, you have companies that are beginning to level off and stabilize, and they're just kind of chugging along. You have the destroyer mentality where people are, feeling like victims and they can't get out of their own way. And then you have the resilient crew, which are people who are clawing and fighting back and resilient and staying in that space to grow. And that is a place where I think we'll see a lot of growth in the ones that stay resilient. And so to all of the businesses out there, whether they're hotel, in the hospitality world, but in general, how do you stay, from your guys' perspective, as you're in the trenches, you're doing research, you're talking to so many different parties to be able to put concepts and ideas together and questions. How does a company stay resilient today?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's mindset. And with that mindset, John, it's focusing and understanding that you don't have to do this by yourself.
Yeah.
You do not have to do this by yourself. we are going to get through this. Let me repeat that again. We are going to get through this as an industry. The folks who strengthen their own individual platforms by bringing on as many tangential pieces as they can to strengthen their foundation, those are the folks who have the best chance. But the folks who even have a better chance are the folks who are doing all of that while staying open to new ideas and thoughtful and considerate and hardworking at the same time. I mean, it's really a mindset piece of that. Yeah. And I also think that there are some bifurcations in that. Look, we have to be knowledgeable that if Dan is talking to a client who has 20 hotels that they own and they're all in Midtown Manhattan, he's going to be feeling very, very differently than somebody who owns 20 coastal Florida select service hotels, right? Because that market has bounced back incredibly quickly. So we have to make ourselves aware, again, as we started the conversation, of putting ourselves in our client's shoes and looking through their lens, because when we do that, we've got a better chance of helping them get through it. But I think ultimately it's not quitting. It's holding yourself accountable for those feelings and making sure you're doing every single thing you can on a daily basis to protect your organization. And with that, bringing in the best partners that you can, even if they felt yucky to you before, even if you said, I don't like working with intermediaries before, there's a lot of new people that you can bring into the fold. And I think we're learning that as a team. To Matt's point, we have more people working together as units than we ever had as a group. And we were a fantastic group to begin with, but now we're even better. I think organizations like ours, as well as our clients, need to focus on that same strategy.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with you. And, asking for help and surrendering to that so you can get help when you need it, and surrounding yourself with as many mentors as you possibly can to limit the amount of mistakes and increase the probability that one next millimeter step is the right next step. Dan or Matt, how about you guys?
I would say it's also embrace the change, which sounds very obvious, but it's amazing how many clients I talk to who they're just dragging their heels. They're gripped into the past, and we're not living in the same world we were living in February. It's different all the way around. I don't care what perspective you're looking at it from, and the more you embrace that change, the more you're going to understand it, and the more you're going to be able to overcome the obstacles that the change has brought.
Yeah, that's well said. Right. Don't waste your energy on woulda, coulda, shoulda. That's going to take you down. Get present and focus on where you're going to go and how to prep, and how to prep moving forward. Yeah. Matt, how about you?
Two big takeaways for me this time around was patience and persistence. And so kind of jumping on what you said there, Dan, as we move through this happens so rapidly to every real estate sector out there, every business unit, both big and small business owners. Everyone's been affected. That client, the borrowers want to move forward, want to find an answer, but when they get that answer, it may not be what they really wanted or had asked for. It's very rarely what they asked for. And so that patience, so we're being pressed as intermediaries to move quickly. And I'm sure, every intermediary out there is feeling that pressure from a client to find that answer. But when they get an answer that may not be the answer, then the pressure flips, because we have to remember our lending friends are also under that same type of pressure. The regulatory environment has yet to decide how they're going to look at these things. The Fed has to come back in and reassess how loan allocations will look. How will banks deal with PPP funding? What will their loan to deposit ratios look like? So that patience and persistence, because we have to stay on top of, as intermediaries, both the lender, and then and to your account, Dan and Andy, we're acting as counselor in between the two, trying to keep it static and keep things moving in a positive direction. So that patience and persistence is the thing that I'm focusing very hard on right now.
I love it.
It can be a challenge, and having teammates in your deal really helps an intermediary with that, because you can share in the pain of patience together.
Well, look, I think you bring up another point, right? Look, we're going through the worst crisis maybe ever in the hospitality industry. Look at the number of smiles you have on this podcast, right? That made you, the persistence, to your point, Matt. is you got to be psyched and happy with who you're working with to help solve these problems. And that
Right.
does go a really, really, this may be the only podcast since COVID-19 broke where people have been smiling and laughing and hugging each other the whole time. But I think that that's a key reason why we are accessing solutions to problems that others just haven't been able to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I love this conversation, fellas. I got 2 questions left. You ready? It's a little bit of a speed round. First question. Kids graduating college today, it's a completely, talk about woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's a completely different world than they anticipated 3-4 months ago. What one piece of advice would you give a college graduate today?
I'll go. I would say if you can't find what you think you want to do, because it might be very difficult, go do something for humanity, for people, for your country, whatever it might be. Go do Peace Corps, go do Habitat for Humanity, and learn a trait, learn a skill, learn a leadership skill that you can take with you.
It's a good one.
I would say, and I would advise them that despite thinking I had all the answers earlier on in my career, the longer I've been in business, what I have found is the more successful I have been in my profession is surrounding myself with people that I enjoy working with and that I trust, and that making sure that folks understand that this is truly a one-lap race, and that we need to enjoy what we are doing primarily, because work-life balance is so incredibly important, but often overlooked.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Matt, how about you?
I get the luxury of going last, so I'll tackle a little bit of both their comments. And Andy knows when I first met Andy and he hired me on the team, work-life balance was very key to me. And for those people coming out of school today, follow your passion. It was something I learned later on in life to redirect myself. I went after a career and I did well and succeeded. But I had a boss that grabbed me by the arm and kind of said, "Are you happy with what you're doing?" And I made a career shift from more of an analytic role to more of a sales-driven role or consulting-driven role. And I have never been happier. And so I'd say if you can't find that ideal job that you think you want today, look around the industry that you want to be in and find an ancillary position. Take a job. Take any job in that field, because relationships matter, mentorships matter. As you come in and you find that piece and you work your way up today, you'll soar as the market climbs.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I love that, fellas. I have one more question. What's one thing the last 3 months that you've learned about yourselves?
Wow.
I'll go first.
You got it.
I learned I can grow. Guys, I learned I can grow a pretty good beard, John.
That is I haven't seen that beard, but that's intense. Yeah.
John, so that's going to be a little bit different than I think but I would tell you, as somebody who's, as Matt and Dan can attest to, I'm a pretty active family man to begin with, but I will tell you unequivocally, the thing that I've learned more over the course of the last 3 months is the value of my family and my loved ones in my life, without a shadow of a doubt. I would not have been able to have been on this podcast, to have closed deals, to have done anything since coronavirus broke out, as someone who's a type 1 diabetic, as someone who has an 85-year-old father, all these other pressures that are there, without the absolute certainty of my foundation at home. And my appreciation and love, which I thought was at 100% going into this, I realized was only at 98%, and now I feel like it's at 110%.
Yeah, I concur with everything you just said. Yeah.
For me, I would say it was the dislike of working at home. And then, not that I didn't know this, but I've now lived it in real time, how hard my spouse, my husband, works, because he works at home full time. And watching him do what he does every day makes me appreciate how hard I work and how hard he's been working, and I just haven't seen it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Matt, how about you?
For me, it's been the humanity. I've worked from home for a long time, and so I've had this kind of really good work-life balance that I cherish. As my peers get to come home and work from home, and that work-life balance shifts, it's been a joy for me to see things become a little bit more human in the contact and the conversation and the relations. It's refreshing.
Yeah, it's great. Guys, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. I know you each got a little bit of different contact information, so tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if they want to connect with you.
Sure. Dan, go ahead.
Dan.Hawkins@Berkadia.com, and my cell phone is 240-793-0290.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Matt, how about you?
Matt Raptosh, matt.raptosh@Berkadia.com, 814-470-9983 is my cell.
Excellent. Andy?
Sure. So Andrew.Coleman@Berkadia.com, but I will tell you without a shadow of a doubt, the best way to get in touch with me is to text me at 703-725-2945, and I will get back to you right away.
Guys, I can't thank you enough. It was great connecting with all of you. I appreciate the wisdom, the guidance, how you are getting through this market, guidance to help your clients through this market. I know you all are, staying in the game, which is not always easy. Your words on how you collaborate and come together for the betterment, not only of yourselves, but your clients, is what everybody needs. And it raises the frequency and vibration of everybody who's listening and all the clients and people that you touch. So I appreciate it. And I wish you guys continued success and all the best. And I appreciate you being on the show today. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for all you do, Johnny, and best to you
John.
and the family, okay?
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
John.
guys.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.